The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would just like to test to see whether everybody can actually hear me. You will see on your little control panel on the right, there's a little hand. If everybody could just stick the hand up to make sure they're hearing okay.
Oh, great.
Okay, so that's great. So a very warm welcome to the webinar on carers' passports in education. My name's Jill Middleton. I'm the Education Policy and Development Manager at Carers Trust. And today I have my colleague Cleo Kinder, who will introduce herself a little bit later, but you can see her lovely photo hopefully there on the screen. And then also we're going to be talking to John, who is a young carer that has had experience of carers' passports in the district that he works and lives. Just before we actually start, I just want to tell you a little bit more about how webinars work for those of you that have not experienced one before. At the moment, you're all muted. That is mainly because it is incredibly distracting if people are not muted because of the background noise that comes in from everybody's environments. There are two means of getting our attention, as you've already experienced. There's the little hands. So if you would like to ask a question or you've got any difficulty, if you wanted to put your hand up, and we will get round to addressing that. The other way, you will also see a box in your control panels that says about asking a question. So you are very welcome to type in a question at any stage. During my part of the presentation, I'm very happy to take questions at any stage. So if you type it into the question box, Cleo will either read that out, or if you would like to speak, if you put your hand up. What I will say at this stage is that all our webinars are recorded in order to be able to then benefit from loading it onto our website so that everybody can then watch it whether they've been available today or not, which is one of the amazing benefits of webinars. So we will be doing that after. If you don't want your name to appear, obviously just keep it out of the question box, and also when you speak you don't have to really say your name, but obviously we'd prefer if we did know who we were talking to. So but if for any reason you don't, obviously the questions are not recorded. So if anybody does post a question and wants to leave it at that, then Cleo will read the question out to me or John, or I will read them out to Cleo at the end so that we can actually answer them, and it's recorded because that adds to the richness of the webinar. We will send out the slides after the webinar, so if anybody wanted to know that, then you will get the slides, so you don't have to make notes. You just need to sit back, relax, and hopefully hear from us everything to do with carers' passports in education. We will be doing a couple of polls, which basically you will see on your screen, and if you can respond, we would like to check out what people's knowledge of carers' passports or carers' cards is at the beginning of the webinar, and then we will do it at the end as well. So, okay, without further ado, I will okay, so as you heard, I'm Education Policy Development at Carers Trust. Most of you may be aware of who Carers Trust, but I didn't want to make that assumption, so I will just say Carers Trust are a national organisation working across the UK that work to improve support services and recognition for anybody living with the challenges of carers. We do this partly through a network of partners, which most of us will know as carer centres that are based in localities, and through the provision of grants to the network partners that enable them to do one-to-one and direct work with carers of all ages. I will also just like at this stage to mention Young Carers in Schools, which is the programme that I lead on. Again, some of you may have heard about that, and obviously today's webinar is not about it, but it's worth mentioning in context of where I come from. So at Carers Trust, We do also run some programs. We've got several ongoing at the moment. Young Carers in Schools has been going for 4 years now, and we have produced resources and an awards scheme to support schools to do more to identify and support young carers in their education. So obviously that's one of the reasons that I was involved in the development of the education carer passport. I do think we have missed one slide, so I'm just going to go back. What I hope you guys get from this is I am going to cover providing background to the development of this particular carer passport program, and once again, this one will cover the education carer passport. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other areas that we develop later on. As I also mentioned earlier, we will then hear from an amazing young carer that very kindly produced a video for us, which we are going to send out after the webinar for you all to see. But basically is also been very brave and willing to talk to us live on the webinar today. So John will talk about his own experience of being part of developing a carer's card in Scarborough and Rydale in North Yorkshire. And then finally, Cleo is going to cover the steps that practitioners can take to implement a scheme, and also share with you the resources that were developed as part of the whole process over the last, I think it's possibly 6 to 8 months. Hopefully as well, you've all managed to watch the video that we sent out as a link earlier this morning, because that really does set the context really well for why carers passport schemes are needed. So hopefully you saw that. If not, again, we'll send out a link after, and the same again, you're very welcome to use that. Again, it was the brilliant work of Scarborough and Rydale carers and their young carers particularly. I'm just going to pause slightly there to check that everything's okay. Okay, so no questions. Okay, so background to the Carer Passport programme. It was funded by the Department of Health and Social Care. And most of you may still know it as the Department of Health, but this is now their official title. So funded by them, and they actually contracted ourselves as Carers Trust and also Carers UK to actually undergo the process, which was right from consultation right through to producing the resources. And part of those resources are the webinar that you're on today. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't only education that we have developed work around. We actually included employment, hospitals, mental health trusts, community and education. The majority of those webinars have already been done, but there is one webinar left, which you can get the details from the Carer Passport website if you're interested. And again, they will all be posted on the website, so people can go back and watch them. Just before we go any further, I just would like to launch the first poll, just so that you feel involved, because webinars can sometimes not feel like that. So I'm just going to do that now. So you will see the question about, would you be able to describe what a Carer Passport is? So if you guys would just respond to that, it will give us an indication . Okay, I'll just wait till we've got the serious thinkers. Okay. So we can see from that 21% of you are actually saying yes, you would be able to describe what a Carer Passport was. 43% have said no, and 43% strangely have said sort of. So okay. So that actually probably is pretty a true reflection of what we actually found from the consultation of people's knowledge and experience of Carer Passport schemes. And so just talking now about the consultation process, we actually originally undertook a survey to many organisations on our contact list. And with regards to the education one, that actually was sent out. So when I'm talking about education, we're talking about schools, colleges and universities. So the survey was sent out. At that stage, we had a relatively low response rate, which we felt was because people didn't really understand the subject. But 90% of those that did reply answered yes to the question that they would be interested in developing a scheme. Some of the questions within the different surveys were around what people understood by the term carer passport, what models were already in operation in their areas, what they would imagine carer take-up might be, and what they thought some of the challenges, barriers and successes to these schemes were. This was actually sent out in March 2017. We then did, with those that actually were able to describe a scheme that they were aware of, or sort of had a good guess at it, we actually followed through with interviews with different schools, colleges and universities, and got some really rich data from that. Mostly it was people that actually had developed and run a form of carer passport. I think there was only one respondent that actually referred to it as a carer passport. At this stage, I would just like to, and I'm not sure anybody's on the call that actually was part of that process, but I do think it's really important to acknowledge their contribution that they made to this work. Their responses obviously were very much used to form the final report and therefore the resources. So I would like to acknowledge and thank all of those that responded to the survey, and actually the interviews particularly, when we're very aware they are very, very busy. Some of the respondents actually said that they did run a scheme, and some of the terminology that was used was things like family support questionnaire, that was used in order to identify young carers in the first place. Some described a one-page profile that they, with permissions and confidentiality, they shared with all agencies. Some people did describe a young carer card, and that was all about how we support young carers in schools, for example, being able to access taxis home if they needed to get home because of their caring role. And then one did describe it as a passport, which is follows the pattern very much of the resources that we developed around, which is around young carers being able to get time out when it was needed, being able to call home, and maybe get some discretion around their homework. And that was in Calderdale, so in the north. And another one described that they had a student passport for all of their vulnerable pupils, so not just about young carers, but it was a young carers were classed as part of their vulnerable pupil group, and they had a passport that enabled them to access certain support within school. Okay, I am just going to move the slide on, but it's sticking slightly. There we go. So I've covered that. Okay, so some of the responses that we received, and we did include obviously young carers in the research that we did, but this was from schools, practitioners, young carers themselves, young carer services. This was where they weren't aware of a scheme. This is where we actually asked what they thought it could be, what should it look like, what would be very useful, what could they see with the work that they did, what the need for a carer's passport could be, and how that would fulfill that need. So they talked about highlighting the family's needs, or about the rights that all young carers should receive, what the core offer from school should be. Really, really, really important, because we hear it back from carers and young carers time and time again, not having to retell their story every time that they may go to a different school, or may get a new social worker, or maybe accessing a health service. Really, really important. There was also around a form of ID for those children identified as young care, and I presume that is around things like not being able to do detentions after school, being able to get time out, being able to get access to a telephone if it was needed, and a very generic one, share information on young carers. So from the consultation and from our experience both at Carers Trust and Carers UK, what did a carer's passport need to look like? So summarise, it needed to be a simple tool that will help schools to coordinate, schools, colleges and universities in this case, to coordinate and connect up their support for young carers, and very much through something that we advocate within the Young Carers in Schools programme through what we call a whole school approach. So that basically means everybody's on board within that school. Secondly, it supports the early identification of students who are young carers and improves staff understanding of their personal circumstances and individual needs in order that they're able to be understanding, which again is something that we hear about from young carers, that they don't necessarily need a massive amount of support from their school, but at the very basic they would appreciate a level of understanding about the role that they undertake and how that may affect their education. So we've covered improved staff understanding. What it also does is triggers an offer of support for them and their families, and finally help schools to create a safe environment where young carers and families feel understood, valued and supported. We believe that Carer Passport Scheme will help all of the above, really, make it become a reality. What does it look like? This was an area of quite a lot of contention, to do with a lot of people felt that the word passport was not massively helpful. That was relatively confusing, but it is the name of the programme that we have been managing here. So, but we heard about examples that it may be a card, and we're going to hear a little bit more about an example of that in a minute. It may be a wallet that they carry, it may be a badge, it may be a sticker within a student handbook. There was a lot of talk here about ensuring that it sort of didn't stigmatise in the way that it was, because we are aware of some schools that has it on a lanyard, on a badge at the end of that. So there was a lot of feedback to say it very much need to be something that the young carer felt comfortable about, and that information could be linked to a confidential record about the young carers. So the carer card would not contain lots of information. It would identify the young person as a carer, but the information that was required so that they didn't have to share it time and time again would actually be linked to a confidential record somewhere within the school system. So I'm not going to dwell too much on what resources, because Cleo, as I mentioned, will be covering that off at the end of the presentation. But what I am going to do now is to introduce John, who I'll let him tell you about himself. I won't cover that. And I just need to change over to John as the presenter. So if you'll bear with me. Okay, so welcome, John. Are you there?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Just a massive thank you, firstly. I don't know whether people can see this on my screen. I'm just trying to get rid of that and to bring up that lovely photo of you. So a very warm welcome and a massive thank you for being brave enough to talk on a webinar, I think for the first time. Is that right, John?
Yes, it is. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Okay, so I will leave you to do what you want to do.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Jonathan. I am a part of the Young Carers Youth Council. I go to Scarborough UTC, which is in North Yorkshire, and I have caring responsibilities for my mum. I've been chosen to talk to you about the North Yorkshire County Council Carers Card. the pros about it, the cons, and why a young carer should have a carer's card. So what is a young carer's card? A young carer's card is given to young people across North Yorkshire who have the caring responsibility for a mother, father, or sibling who they live with who needs additional support. A young carer has a carer's card in case situations arise at school where their caring responsibility affects their school responsibility. The carer's card is used as a support mechanism, so it's not a get out of jail card. So when a young person is given a young carer's card, they are given the responsibility to use it appropriately. So what can we do to get the card noticed? Teachers, support staff, and all school staff in general need to know what a young carer's card is and why it's important to the well-being of the person who carries the card. The Young Carers Youth Council I'm part of designed a campaign called #WeCare. The aim of the campaign is to raise awareness in schools of what life is like being a young carer. As you've seen in the video presentation of the day of a life in the young carer, the video starts by showing a young carer helping us around the house making breakfast for siblings and missing the school bus due to their caring responsibilities. It then shows them at school arriving late, having to sign the late book, and as the school day goes on, it shows an anxious parent setting off the young person's mobile in class. The mobile phone is then confiscated by the teacher, and the missed call plays on the young carer's mind for the rest of the day, as they are unable to get the mobile phone back until the end of the day. This is a classic situation, you see, where the young carer's card could be used at the start of the day to explain why they were late, and later on into the day to be able to make that phone call home and check how things are. If a situation happened at home on an evening, this could also interrupt homework schedules. So if a school were aware of the young carer's card and the caring responsibilities, a teacher would be able to give an extra day's deadline for that extra homework. So here's the summary. As the cons, most teachers are not informed enough about the cards, and a young carer coordinator at school is often the only one who knows. And schools sometimes struggle to get the cards from North Yorkshire County Council. It's got something to do with money and printing costs. On the pro side, however, the Young Carers card gives us an identity, and it allows teachers to know who we are without words or explanations every time, and it's a low-key way of letting adults know something isn't right at home. And if you have a good school, you might not even need a carer's card, as teachers and your parents will know what's wrong, and they'll help with different situations without having to, hold out the carer's card and show your reasoning on why you didn't do this piece of homework or why you might need a timeout for a few minutes. But the most important thing from a young carer's perspective is that schools actually understand the role of a young carer and their needs in situations in school and outside school. And so, like I said, if they are a good school, they might not need a young carer's card.
Okay. That's it from us, Jill.
Okay, thank you. I'm just waiting for the control panel to come back to me because I can't. That's great. So I'm back. Thank you, John. Very articulate and well explained. I wonder whether you wouldn't mind taking questions from people if we get any. So
no,
if
I don't mind.
Thank you, that's great. The same I actually forgot at the end of my session to say. So if anybody's got any questions, let's firstly take them for John. If you either want to type them in and Cleo can read them out, or if you would like to put your hand up, then we are able to unmute you. And it would be great to hear from you because it just feels as if you're speaking into a big space. I'm sure John agrees when you haven't got interaction. So would love to hear from people. Any questions for John? I'm not sure if everything's working okay, but I'd be very surprised if people didn't have questions for John. It would be really good if you could, or if you'd watched the WeCare video this morning, if you've got any questions on that. So I'll give you a few minutes, people. Maybe you'll have trouble working your panel out. Okay, so I can see a question in the question box.
Yeah, shall I read that out? We've got a question for you, John, and it says, "Hi, John. As well as the Young Carer Passport card, are there any other provisions in your school for young carers? So what else does your school do to support young carers?"
They don't have anything physically, such as the cards, but they allow other things that most schools currently don't do without having a young carer's card. But if you're known to be a young carer and you're known in the school, teachers will most likely let you have that extra 5 minutes time out and actually have a reasoning to be out of lessons and doing homework late and stuff like that. So they'll give you that extra advantage without having to actually get out the young carer's card.
Okay, thank you. We've got another one, which I'm not sure if you might be able to answer, or maybe Claire would, which is, how is the card funded?
Claire, can I start?
At the moment, that's one of the key sticking points. Sorry, I'm Claire Robinson. I'm John's support worker from the Young Carer Service. At the moment, that's one of the challenges we have with North Yorkshire, is that they actually don't have the funds to print the cards. So we have a really diminishing stock of the cards. So new carers are very often not assigned a card because we're waiting for that reprinting. But we would expect that that's something that county would be doing rather than the individual schools.
Okay. And did anyone else have any other questions? Oh, here we go. Someone has asked, did you receive any negative responses by having a carer's pass, for instance, your peers, or did anyone kind of react negatively to you having this?
Yeah, I have. Honestly, it's the way some people can also abuse the cards. So people can go out and say, "Oh, yeah, well, you're just using this as an extra timeout sort of thing," or they might be saying, "Oh, well, you might just be purposely on like your sort of games console and doing bits," when a young carer is being a young carer is a proper responsibility, and it's not something to take lightly. So there's no reason that you should be, slacking off on your Xbox or whatever, and abusing the authority of having a young carer's card. But yeah, I've definitely had some negative responses from a few people about the young carer's card.
Okay, thank you for that, John. Did anyone else have any more questions?
Clea, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine, Jill. I think you might need to press show screen again just to make sure everyone else can see your presentation.
Okay.
There we go. There's a photo of John as well.
I can see a few more questions in the questions box. There's one about, as well as the Young Carer Passport, are there any other provisions in your school?
Yeah, we
if I can answer,
yeah,
for John, it's Claire again. In John's school, there's a very small number of young carers. So we tend to have lunches together once a month, or I will see the young carers individually. In other schools where there are more young carers, so there's maybe 10 or 12 young carers in a school, then they usually have weekly or monthly lunch clubs where all the young carers can get together. We attend some of them. If it's a really good school, we go monthly. If it's not so good school, we will attend them more regularly to give the teachers the support. And in some schools, we do have schools that do extra homework clubs for young carers. So we do have other schools that do other things. John's is a great school with a small number of carers, so has less sort of interventions happening.
Okay, great. And one more question is, do you think it would help if the schools have an information video or an awareness video to achieve a better understanding of young carers?
Yeah, definitely. It helps. It helps with a multitude of people, because I even said to a few people coming down to do this webinar, and I said I had to do a webinar for the young carers cards, and the first thing they, like, 3/4 of everyone just said, "What's one of those?" And I was just like, well, there you go. You see, not many people know about it, but if we can get more videos like the one that all of you people watched this morning, in schools and in assemblies, or even people like us doing assemblies from the Young Carers Council to show what it's like to be a young carer and what we have to go through, and the young carers cards, then it'll give people a better understanding in general on what we have to go through.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And just to say that there are Carer Passport videos on the Carer Passport website as well, so they do kind of explain what one would be in an education setting. They're quite small, only about 1.5 minutes long as well. That's on the YouTube channel. Okay, Jill, shall we move on?
Certainly. Thank you again, John. That was brilliant. Hopefully you'll stay with us, if that's okay.
Will do.
One of the other questions I did notice on the question panel from Helen is how many people were watching the webinar? I don't know whether we still need to answer that or whether it was a typed response was made.
Yeah, sorry, I typed a response to that one. So yeah, we
Okay.
currently have 19 people signed up, including staff. So yeah, I've typed a response.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Cleo. So just to go back one step, I was so keen to get John up on there, and when he's given up his valuable time, that I forgot to say, did anybody want to ask any questions from me before I hand over to Cleo, who will talk to you much more about the resources that were developed as part of this programme? Okay, well,
we've got one that has come up, and that says, how does the Carer Passport refer schools to information regarding whole family working, preventing inappropriate care relating to safeguarding issues, and also the best practice identified through the Young Carers in School programme that is delivered by the Children's Society and Carers Trust?
Okay. Would you mind reading that again, Cleo? It was quite a long one, and I'll split it down.
So how does the Carer Passport refer schools to information regarding whole family working to prevent inappropriate care relating to safeguarding issues?
Okay, I mean, obviously, as I mentioned in the first section, we were unable to identify many examples of Carer Passport, Carer card schemes that were currently up and running. I will say that doesn't mean that there aren't some that we weren't able to identify as part of that, because we only were able to send the survey to contacts that were on our lists, and then therefore we were only able to speak to schools, colleges and universities that had responded as part of the first stage. So, you know, we need to be careful that there are probably other examples out there that we actually currently are not aware of. So if anybody does know of any, obviously we'd love that information. But so nobody particularly actually spoke about specifically to do with using the cards to refer the young carer to maybe social care with regards to safeguarding issues. We did have one example of an area that actually spoke about it, being one for vulnerable pupils, and also about carers cards to say how can we support young carers in schools. Really, any more in depth than that, where we weren't able to, within the confines of the consultation process, able to find out exactly how that happened. But what we can do is I'll take that question away and can maybe find out a little bit more about it. And if we know the person that asked that question, I could get back to you on that.
Yeah, I'll pass the details on to you, Jill.
Okay. Thank you. Was there a second part to the question, Cleo, or was that?
It was just referring to how do Carer Passports refer schools to the best practice that's identified in the Young Carers in Schools programme, which is obviously delivered in partnership between Carers Trust and the Children's Society.
Yeah, I mean, it was great that obviously one of the partners were actually involved in the development of this Carer Passport scheme, as in Carers Trust were very much involved with Carers UK. And that enabled us, particularly myself, to make sure that the consultant that was actually carried out the first few stages knew absolutely everything about how young carers in schools operated, and the experience and the feedback that we used in order to steer the programme. So young carers in schools, if you look at the report, you will notice the report from this piece of consultation is available. You will notice that young carers in schools is referenced a lot. And some of the principles that young carers in schools, for example, the whole school approach, is very much embedded in everything, because we got the opportunity to make sure that that was involved in the consultation part. So you can read more actually in the final report that's available, and we will we have got a slide at the end, but we will post up the links to those before we send the presentation out to everybody. So the link to the final report we will put on there as well.
Great, thanks, Jill. And that seems to be all of the questions for now.
Okay. So if now I'll hand over to Cleo to talk more about the resources that were actually developed as part of the programme and why.
Great, thanks, Jill. If you could move it on to the next slide, that would be great, please.
I am. It's really 1 minute. I'm trying, but it won't work at the moment. There we go.
Brilliant. Hi everyone, I'm Cleo. I'm the Policy and Research Administrator at Carers Trust, and I've been working on this project since the beginning with Jill and the rest of my colleagues at Carers Trust and Carers UK. And I did quite a lot of the work on creating some of the templates. So I just thought I'd run through some of the resources that are available online. So these are all available on the Carer Passport website at the moment, and the link will be up at the end of this, and they can all really help you with setting up a Carer Passport. So the first thing is that this is obviously a webinar about education, Carer Passports in education settings, but we've split them up on the website. One set of resources are for schools and the other are for colleges and universities, because we thought that they kind of had different things that needed to go in those. So on your screen now you can see the front page of our guide for schools and of our guide for colleges and universities. So the guide includes, as you can see on the screen, good practice, case studies, statistics, and how they work in practice. So the toolkits are kind of designed to provide you with the know-how, insight, and expertise about how to build your own Carer Passport scheme. And yes, there's a clear recognition that Carer Passport schemes are often owned and developed locally or by an employer in other settings other than education to suit their needs. So we've used the experience and knowledges from key leaders who have developed Carer Passports locally, as well as experience of carers themselves, to provide insight and content needed to get the scheme going. So all these guides go through, first of all, a section which is key facts about carers. So there are some really useful statistics that we've used there that could be really useful if you're trying to explain why a Carer Passport is needed. So in these, they're specifically around young carers or student carers. Then it kind of goes through what a Carer Passport is, which is a lot of what Jill has already done today, and talking about the importance of coordinating and connecting up support for young carers or student carers through an organisation-wide or whole school approach. Then it goes through some of the examples. So support for student carers and young carers is growing, but these developments are quite inconsistent and do not currently constitute a comprehensive Carer Passport. So we've got together a lot of different examples of good practice and put them together. We've also based our templates on these, but we do have the originals up there as well, so you can see how Carer Passports are working in their actual settings. We also have a section about what difference it makes, including some really nice quotes from different people who have been involved, such as a student at Winchester University saying, "Since being recognised as a young adult carer, I have had support with amending deadlines when needed. I've also had access to bursaries, counselling and other welfare support that they offer." Another quote is from a head of pupil support at a school, saying, "At our school, we encourage our young carers to be proud of themselves and how they balance home and school life. These passports will give them a belonging and a chance to stand up for who they are." So yet again, just some nice examples that could be useful if you're trying to sell the idea of setting up one of these schemes. It also runs through the business case and the benefits, so just the kind of ideas about why these could be useful, including saving time, support with finances and leisure and social activities, students knowing what to expect from the offer, and the fact that they can help implement the Young Carers in Schools programme. It also runs through some potential challenges and how to overcome these. So we often get questions about, is there a criteria for a carer passport, how to promote these and communicate that to students, and ideas about funding, especially in further education. So we run through some of that in this guide as well. Then at the end of the guide is a going ahead list. So it's a list of ideas that colleges and schools and universities can get started on, or at least start discussing as an organisation. And then we move on to the templates. So first up, on the next slide, is our card.
Sorry, Cleo, it's not.
That's okay. Brilliant, thank you, Jill. So yeah, we've designed a suite of templates, but we're not saying you have to use all of these or any of them. They're just for an idea. You also might think that you just want to use one individually, or they might just give you an idea for your own one. We've also created them so they can be amended, so you kind of can download them in a PDF form and add in your own logos and photos and things like that. So we just wanted to do everything we could to help. So first of all are the cards. On the left-hand side, the green ones are the kind of ones we've created for colleges and universities, and on the right are the ones we've developed for a school. Obviously, a card isn't right in all establishments. So for the one on the left, the college and universities one, we were thinking that these will probably be more likely to be used in sixth forms and colleges rather than universities, because in universities you're less likely to kind of need to give an explanation for why you're leaving a seminar, but that could still be quite useful in a college. And we've put the little kind of graphics on the back just to be clear that this could be used for getting extra time with deadlines, or explaining why they've turned up late, or just that they need a bit of understanding. It's quite a useful way for a carer to communicate with teachers in a discreet way. If school staff or college staff are aware of the programme, just being able to see this might stop the need for a whole conversation needing to be happening in school time. When we were talking to carers, some carers said that they did want a photo included because they thought this would make it seem more legitimate, that it was definitely for them, that it couldn't be copied, whereas others were saying that they'd rather not have their photo on it so they couldn't be identified if it was lost. So I think you can pick whatever is right for your establishment, or whatever is right for the young carer or student carer themselves. And as mentioned, yeah, you can add in your logos. On the right hand side, on the schools template, we included some more markers on this just so the young carers themselves are really clear what this can mean, such as a timeout, an okay to use your phone, etc. And also just that a whole range of school staff can be really clear what it means as well. We also included the authorised date and the valid until date, so the school staff can be sure that it's definitely valid and has been discussed, and the card won't be used in the wrong way. We've also thought it was really important to include emergency contact number, so this could maybe be the person they care for, so that if something happened to someone while they're at college or university, they could be informed and know that that person can't be their carer for a while maybe, or another family member. And we've also included the Young Carer Service phone number, so everyone at the education setting can be clear of who they need to get in touch with around their Young Carer Service. And if we could go on to the next page, please, Jill.
Okay, once again, I'm trying, but I seem to have to hit it several times. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. So the next page will be, hopefully, there we go, the application form. So we had a few examples of these from different either carer services or schools or colleges, and so we've kind of used the things that we thought were really important and really good on those into this one. There are actually two different application forms, again, kind of for the more further education settings and for schools. They kind of just use slightly different terminology around tutors or teachers and things like that, and also just making it clear where details are needed. We designed these to be really simple, but also capture all the information that staff would need to help. So we've also designed these not to just be filled in by the carer on their own. They're designed to be filled in by a member of staff during a discussion with a young carer or student carer to make sure it is a trigger for different questions and that the staff can gain a real understanding of what is happening. So it kind of helps to create that engagement. So it obviously just asks their kind of basic questions, but we also wanted to ensure links between GPs and local carer services, because we feel that when this information is okay to be shared, it is really useful to kind of have that joined up approach, but obviously carers can choose to fill in the bits that they feel comfortable with doing. We've also included the person with parental responsibility, but obviously a student carer could be of any age and over the age where that information is needed, so that doesn't have to be filled in, but in a school setting or sixth form setting that could be more useful. And then we've included a section about the person being cared for, but also the details of the caring role. So ideally, after this has been filled in, it would then go onto a kind of central system which people, school staff or college staff could then log into and see the details of the caring role if the carer has said it's okay to share that. So then they don't have to keep on retelling their story or situation over again. And we thought that was a really key thing about a carer passport. It stops the need to constantly be retelling. And then we've also included it's quite small on the screen there, but other services involved. So it kind of asks that if you have a social worker attached to your kind of caring responsibility, and if you've had a young carer's assessment, and that small writing in black just kind of explains what a young carer's assessment is, so just people can be aware of what it is, and it kind of breaks it down so it doesn't seem as scary if people have kind of heard about it, or if the school can refer them for a young carer's assessment. And then there's a bit at the bottom that's just about approval from the carer that they would like this information to be shared, or who they would like it to be shared with, and other members of staff. And then we've included the bottom bit that could be ripped off and given to a local young carer service, because we thought that could just be a really good way to start the referral system. Okay, if we could go on to the next slide. So we've also created a range of passports and leaflets that could hopefully be useful in promoting the scheme across the education setting that it's in. So on the left we've got an example of what one of the posters looks like, and it's also what the front cover of the leaflets look like. As you can see, they can be edited to include the specific teacher or tutor's name and a school logo. So they're all adaptable. The leaflet is quite a simple 4-page leaflet that just really explains what a carer passport is and how it should work, which could also be useful for kind of sending home to parents, things like that. So these can all be printed off and used. And they're useful not only for promoting to the carers themselves and students, all students, but to staff, because then they're more aware of what the branding is, and so if they see a card or an application form, they'll be a bit more aware of what it is. And then we've also created checklists, both separately for schools and for colleges and universities. So they're just a list of other useful things that can be implemented. So they include things such as wording for comms, ideas about how these details can be logged on a central database. There's also an idea about how you could use intranet or staff training, and then other ideas for wording for things like messages for new students, emails to welfare tutors, inclusion in fresh affairs, leaflets, things like that. And also, especially for colleges and universities, about how this could be linked up with kind of financial aid and bursaries, and how the college toolkit that Carers Trust have written can also link up alongside this piece of work. In the school checklist, it's a lot more about how the scheme could be administered, and also how it can be used to check on the progress of attendance and attainment. And there's also some ideas there about what schools can put in place to ensure the emotional well-being of students, such as mentoring schemes and support groups. So yeah, there's a whole range of these resources. They can all be downloaded. The kind of inspiration behind these resources can also be seen up there, that kindly lots of different services and schools have sent in, so you can see how they kind of vary between different places. But the main thing that we wanted to give was just ideas that people can adapt and use really easily, so it doesn't take much. You don't have to create your own passports, you can just use all of these, but that also, if you want to, you can just use these as an idea and create your own or adapt these, and they can be used as a suite altogether or just independently. And that's me. If anyone has any questions, please do write them in the question box or put your hand up.
Would be great to hear from people.
But if not, we'll definitely put the link to the Cara Passport website at the end. You'll be able to see that, and you can just have a click through and look through all of those. And obviously there aren't just resources for the education sections, there's actually resources for employees and communities if you were thinking about kind of implementing one where you work as well. So it's really worth having a look through the website, and also having a look at the videos that have been created, because they can be really useful to play in a school assembly or at a staff meeting that just really simply explain what they are. Yeah, over to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you, Cleo. So I think what we'll do now, if there aren't any further questions, is we at the moment have got a quote on the screen from a young carer that was part of the consultation process, and certainly with the work that we do and the work that we do with the Children's Society as part of WISIS, I've often heard young carers say many of the issues that they sort of experience, we believe, and the feedback that we get would mean that carers' passports, so for example, not sharing their story all the time, just being able to have a level of understanding that they want from teachers about how their role may impact. We believe that that carer passport can be one of the solutions to some of the additional stresses that young carers currently experience. And this quote that you can see just confirms that, actually coming from a young carer. So, and finally, if we can just, if there are no further questions, we will just do a final poll just to see whether this session has hit the buttons for you. So you should be able to see that now. So if you could all vote again, and I'll read out the responses, that would be good. Which is launched, isn't it?
Let me just...
Should be, but there's no voting, so either everybody's fallen asleep or...
I will do it, Jill. I think it's just gone a bit. We just need to do the other one. There we go. I think that's launched now.
Okay. Yep, so if you just take a bit of time. Oh my goodness, that's excellent. Well, that was a good use of an hour. Obviously, please do encourage any of your colleagues to... take a look at the webinar once it's posted up. We will be sending out a short survey following this, and we'll also, as said earlier, be sending you a link to John's video that we have permission can be shared. So along with the We Care video, I think that's a very powerful sort of influencing tool that anybody that may want to take that back to their organisation to consider developing a carer passport scheme. So without further ado, once again, a massive thank you to John and Claire, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. Great results, that you all know more about how to develop a scheme now, and look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.